of a family that is, I guess in your words, malignantly dysfunctional. How so?
From very early on, the kids were separated, not physically, but emotionally and psychologically. They were never able really to count on each other in ways that mattered. They were in competition with each other for resources that felt over time scarce, which is absurd.
Donald figured out what his father wanted.
Yes.
His mother, not so much.
No. No. She was in some ways very much a creature of that generation. The gender divide in my family was stark even for the 40s and 50s. She had very little to do with the boys. It was almost as if the boys were my grandfather's purview and the girls were hers. I think from quite early on, Donald just didn't expect much from her. He knew, I think by the time he was sent to New York Military Academy, that she wasn't going to stand up for him. And after that very tragic year when she was quite ill and inaccessible, when he was only 2.5, I don't think the rift was ever repaired.
You describe her as being more or less at her wit's end with Donald before he's sent to the military academy.
Yeah.
How so?
He didn't listen. He didn't respect her. I believe that because of that initial rift, which wasn't her fault, you know, she was extraordinarily ill. She was in and out of the hospital for 6 to 12 months. And after that, I don't believe that she was attended to properly. You know, her physical well-being was perhaps addressed, but her psychological well-being was not. And for whatever reason, she was not able to repair what that absence had wrought. So as he grew older, I think that he just didn't know how to relate to her, couldn't trust her. And what I'm sure he experienced as an excommunication to boarding school was probably the last straw.
He described, I interviewed him on Mother's Day a few years back. He said she was a warm, loving, and generous person. It was his father who was the hard one. Mm-hmm. Yet you tell a story of going to the White House in April of 2017 and noticing what's on the desk behind the president.
Yes. Yeah, it was pretty striking. And to be honest, I didn't notice until I saw the picture my brother had taken of me while I was sitting behind the Resolute desk. And there was my grandfather right over my shoulder. So I had, of course, heard the conversation that Donald had with Marianne, you know, maybe you should get a picture of mom on your desk, and his saying, oh yeah, somebody get me a picture of mom. But it wasn't until I saw that image of my grandfather hovering in the background that I realized how striking it was, that my grandmother was nowhere to be seen, you know, not even an afterthought, really. Although, of course, a picture was gotten, and I believe it's still there now.
Tell me about your father at his best.
Unfortunately, I can only do that through other people. By the time I was born, he was quite ill.
Alcohol?
Yes. Which, you know, caused all other kinds of illnesses too. And because my family, for reasons that are rather complicated, were very invested in portraying my father as a loser, somebody who didn't toe the party line, somebody who betrayed my grandfather by not going into the business, and doing the entirely irresponsible thing of becoming a professional pilot for TWA at the dawn of the jet age. I, much to my shame, didn't understand what he had accomplished. I was often ashamed of him. not realizing that he had no support in the family and was treated as somebody who was damaged beyond repair and wasn't worth investing in any way, emotionally or otherwise.
You write, Donald, following the lead of my grandfather, and with the complicity, silence, and inaction of his siblings, destroyed my father.
Yeah, that was hard to write, much harder to witness. Partially because my dad, at his best, which unfortunately was in the 60s, the early 60s, was, I mean, not that it matters, but he was an extraordinarily handsome man. But he was also charming, but in a deep way, kind, generous, fiercely loyal, and beloved. I've been in touch with his friends who haven't seen him since college or even before that, and they remember him as the most wonderful human being they ever met. They remember the wonderful times they had together. You know, he would put them in his Cessna and fly them to Bimini for the weekend to go fishing, or out east to Montauk. And it's extraordinary to hear almost 50 years later, 60 years later, what an indelible impression they made upon him and how fondly they still remember him.
You say that was a hard sentence to write. I left out the next sentence.
Okay.
Which is?
I'm sorry, I don't remember.
I can't let him destroy my country.
Yes. Yeah, I should remember that. That sounds pretty arrogant, so let me explain what I mean. I feel, as I write in the book, that there are so many parallels between the circumstances in which my family operated and in which this country is now operating. I saw firsthand what focusing on the wrong things, elevating the wrong people can do, you know, the collateral damage that can be created by allowing somebody to live their lives without accountability. And it is striking to see that continuing now on a much grander scale. And what I was getting at there is that if I can do anything to change the narrative and to tell the truth, I need to do that, because I don't believe the American people had the entire truth 4 years ago.
Why didn't you write the book 4 years ago?
I thought long and hard about saying something. I had a book wasn't in my head at that time. And honestly, it took me a while to take it seriously, to take the election, his part in it seriously. So even if I had thought of writing a book, there wouldn't have been time. But I did think of speaking out, knowing that it would have been quite risky to do. And then I realized there literally was nothing I could say at the time. Nothing stuck. You know, he insulted a Gold Star family. He called upon people at the Republican National Convention to come up with a Second Amendment defense against Hillary Clinton. And then, you know, by the time the Access Hollywood tape rolled around, I knew that if I had said anything, I would have been painted as a disgruntled, disinherited niece who just wanted her 15 minutes, which obviously is still being said about me now, but it wouldn't have made a...
That's exactly what the White House says. They say it's a book of falsehoods, that you're writing out of financial self-interest. Basically, you're lying for money.
It makes perfect sense that they would say that. Projection is a powerful thing. But if I had wanted money or revenge, I would have done this 10 years ago when it was infinitely safer And he was still a very public figure. But neither one of those things interested me. I was living my life. I was beyond, well beyond what had happened 20 years ago with my family. And it would have served no purpose other than getting revenge or maybe making some money.
And what do you say to the people who say America knew exactly what they were doing when they elected Donald Trump? He's kind of an open book. What don't they know?
Yeah, I don't think that's at all true, because outside of New York, I don't think people really quite understood the truth behind his business record and his financial failures, which are legion and serial. Beyond that, it was such a complex election. There was so much going on that I don't think the choices that people had to make were necessarily based on an honest appraisal. There was so much interference from so many different sources.